A 76-foot sailboat was drifting toward the Bridge of Lions.
Yep, this is us. And this is where this story takes a turn. It is pretty exciting and a lot of stuff happens, and that's why we split this episode up into 2 parts. So stick with us and let's kick off part 2 of Captain Carlos and the Big White Boat. You remember last time we left off, Captain Carlos here was getting into St. Augustine, and we told you that was where the real fun was going to start.
Alright, so last time I was talking, I believe I was talking about backing the boat out of the slip going to the mooring ball, right? And when I go over to the mooring ball, I captured that by myself. I was real proud, and sit there. I had Corey actually come down and bring me some supplies. He brought me a dinghy.
Where'd we get that dinghy from?
I don't know. You brought it down on the S10.
Yeah, I remember. I bought it like an hour north of here.
Yeah.
I took that down. I drove down to St. Augustine.
Then what? We hung out on the mooring ball. He hung out with me for I think a day, and we did some diving on the bottom because that was our first real opportunity to do any diving on the bottom and see what was going on down there. And so I had a couple choices. I decided to go to the north mooring field, and there was a spot right beside the beginning of the mooring field, and that's where I laid the anchor at. And I felt comfortable. I had a good enough swing. I was really close to the mooring field, but I sat there for, I don't know, a couple of days, and we had a forecast of a nor'eastern coming through. And so I was doubling down on boat checks and making sure my snubber was good, and the anchor had a great hold, which the boats move all kinds of directions in those mooring fields between the wind and the current that exists there. I finished up all my engine work about 3 o'clock. At that point, I did a boat check, walked around the boat, checked the snubber, checked the anchor line, everything was golden. So I laid down. I laid down for about 15 minutes, and that's when I got awoken by what sounded like a gunshot. Essentially, there was so much tension on the snubber line that it just blew it to pieces. The snubber takes the brunt of the shock, really, and it keeps it from pulling the chain one way or another and pulling the anchor up. When the sound of a gunshot went off, I ran on deck, and by the time I got to the deck, all the chain had been snatched off the gypsy and just ran out 300 feet of chain, and before I could get there it was all gone. My next go-to move was cranking the engine, so I ran back to crank the engine, and when I did so, it fired up just fine, and there's 2 available mooring balls there at the edge of the mooring field. Looking for the next possible opportunity to get the boat stopped, because the boat's moving at an incredible rate, and I really need to find a way to not run into the 10 to 15 boats that are behind me. So I had to really do some hardcore maneuvering, putting some throttle to that engine in order to try and secure me a line onto one of those mooring balls. I tried that probably about 2 or 3 times, and I knew I didn't want to hit the bridge lines, and I didn't want to hit anybody's boat.
How tall would you say the bridge is down there?
It's probably around 30 feet.
30 feet, right? So not very much space. You have to think, the masts are taken down now. You can see it laying beside us. But the mast is 82 feet long for the main, so obviously the boat would have made contact, and it would have been catastrophic for the mast, the rigging,
the bridge,
the sails that are furled inside both the mizzen and the main, the bridge as well. And as a matter of fact, Carlos actually made the news down there, and there was a couple other boats that made the news as well that did end up hitting the bridge.
6 boats broke anchor that night.
Yeah, I think they had 2 or 3 that made contact with the bridge and take on water, and
one actually sank.
Yeah.
So it was a very big deal. Everybody was aware of the nor'eastern coming in, but nobody knew that it was going to be this big of a blow. So back to my story, I'm maneuvering the boat, trying to get a hold of one of these mooring balls, and about the 3rd time I go for a grab to the mooring ball, I look back and realize that I'm not pumping any water. So I tried to grab the mooring ball a few more times, and the cabin began to fill with smoke. And not knowing what exactly was going on, knowing that I was overheating, I began to work the throttle a little bit more and realizing that I was losing power as I'm trying to get to these mooring balls. At that time, I realized I had pretty much three possible outcomes of this. It was either A, I hit the bridge, which would have been catastrophic. B, I would have hit another boat. The last option was to send it to the shallows, which I knew it was shallow by the seawall, and that if I got over there, I could ground the boat, possibly work the secondary anchor. And that's what I chose to do. As soon as this all started, I jumped on the radio and did my pom-poms and let the Coast Guard know that I was adrift, that I was having problems, and the fire department was the first one on the scene. So I get over to the seawall, I jump immediately to the bow to try the secondary anchor one more time to stop me from sliding all the way to the seawall and damaging the boat. So I got the secondary anchor down at that point, and that's when the fire department got on board. I let them know as I was going to the seawall that I had smoke pouring out of the cabin. There's a possibility of a fire. So they jumped on board, and me and one of the guys from the fire department ran through the boat, making sure nothing was on fire. That's when I realized it was just raw water that was spilling onto the engine. Once we got that under wraps and realized there was no fire, I discussed with them what I needed to keep the boat safe. I asked them for an anchor. They actually brought me a rusted up Danforth anchor that I would put on my stern later on that morning.
It's sitting back there against the stairs right now.
Actually, I'm keeping it for a memento to myself.
We'll bring it back down to you guys down there at the St. Augustine Fire Department next time we pass through.
Yeah, actually they said I could keep it. I talked to them later on and they said that you can have it,
nice.
no problem.
Nice, I got an idea for that. We'll do something with that.
Yeah, it's special to me. It helped me claw off the wall after a few days of being there. I get to the wall, I get the boat stationary. Thankfully, I had made connections in the St. Augustine cruisers net there, and I really got a bunch of friends from just talking and conversing and explaining my story of moving the boat to Norfolk. And so I contacted one of the guys that I met through the cruising site, and he brought me a huge Danforth that I put off the starboard bow, which was a wonderful thing because going into the next night, the 1-inch line that my secondary anchor was attached to inevitably snapped like a twig also, which sent me going to the wall, and that's when I began to ride against the wall with the 3-foot swell that was coming in, the sustained winds that were coming in, and there was nothing I could do. It sucked because at that point I went back to the wall. That's when I contacted the Coast Guard again. I got the Coast Guard. Inevitably, the Coast Guard was out there, the police department was there, the fire department was there, and the EPA actually got called because I had some fuel on board and they didn't know if the side was going to rub so hard that the tank would rupture and I would create pollution. I really pleaded my case to those guys to try to help me and get me pulled off this wall. Going into that night, it got so bad between the boat rubbing up against the wall and the boat also bouncing off the bottom.
We honestly expected that the boat was going to be a total loss at that point. So
yeah, I was doing everything in my power to keep it. I stayed on board. The Coast Guard asked me to step off. At that point, it was so dangerous that I made them put a security line around the boat because I didn't know if the mast was going to come down. I didn't know if we were going to sink, and they asked me to step off board, and I didn't really want to, and it took them consistently asking me to step off. So I did, knowing that they didn't want to put their life in jeopardy. If something happened to the boat, they would have to come save me, and they didn't care about the boat, they cared about me. So
I think it's a liability thing too. You know, they didn't want to have someone come back and try to sue them because they made the wrong move trying to help the boat. And so while I understand that,
yeah, I don't blame them one bit.
The options, the situation appears dire when you're in there, but when you think about worst case scenario, what really could have happened there, was loss of life a potential for that? It's always a potential, right? You certainly could have gotten pinned between the seawall and the boat or something like that, but I also think if the boat had sank, it would at least be partially submerged, but you would have been able to swim and probably rescue yourself. So I don't think that you made an irresponsible decision by wanting to stay on the boat as long as you did. But definitely, I think at the end of the day, you made the right call to leave at some point.
Yeah, which I left for an hour, and I watched the skies lighten up a little bit, and the Coast Guard asked me if I was going to get back on the boat, that I'd give them a call. And when I got back to the boat, I did everything I could do to secure, make sure all the bilge pumps were running properly, and I just rode it out inside the boat, and I finally got a few hours of sleep. And then the next day is when everything started to subside, and I had inquired to the local towboat US there. I made an appointment for them to come and pull me off the next day when the conditions would calm down. On waiting on them, I was taking the anchors that I had, the bow anchor that a buddy of mine through the St. Augustine cruiser net give me, and then the stern anchor that the fire department give me, and I would basically pull the boat as far out as I possibly could during high tide, and then just toss the anchor out again. I would toss the stern anchor out, but eventually I did get the boat about 30 to 40 feet off the wall, working with somebody helping me reset the bow anchor and me throwing out the stern anchor. I had the sheriff's department reset the stern anchor just to help me because I was so tired at that point. But I used the rear winch to pull in the boat, and it would get enough tension on it that it would crawl off. So towboat would eventually say that they were going to come pull me off. Towboat didn't really feel comfortable with pulling that size of boat off. So he rode past. I won't get into all the details.
It wasn't a great experience.
No, it was not.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll just leave it at that. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because when they did help, it was good. We pulled the boat off, but I sat there for a whole day aground. Basically, when it was low tide, you could see the boat was sitting a good foot out of the water, below the waterline. I was hard aground. I was hanging out in the St. Augustine Municipal Marina's lounge there, and that's when we actually had somebody come and be first mate on the boat.
Thanks, Eric. We appreciate all your help, man. Wouldn't have been able to get the boat up here without you, so a lot of thanks go out to you for the leg that you did with us.
Yeah, and it was spare the moment. He jumped on a Greyhound bus and rode down, and my phone wasn't active, and he wasn't able to contact me. There was no way for him to get in contact. So I'm sitting in the lounge, and this guy walks in, and he asks, everybody's kind of talking about me and talking about the storm, and immediately he just comes and gives me a hug, and we sit there for that night and wait for the towboat to come in at 10:30, and immediately at 9:45 I get on the radio and just start hailing towboat because I have no cell phone at this point, and I need to get pulled off of this wall. I can't sit there for any longer because every time I would get hard aground, water would be coming in. It's 9:45. I get on the VHF. I'm hailing towboat. I talk to the boat captain. Explains that he's worried about pulling the boat off because of the size of the boat and the conditions aren't right. And I said, look, man, it's glass out here. There's no wind. He basically decided to come and didn't guarantee me that he was going to pull me off, but we'd get a good idea what to do. And he pulled up, and it couldn't have been any more perfect. All the boats swang. It was slack tide. The wind had died down. He pulls up. We talk for a second. I say, let's do this. The towboat captain had a good tie-in to a local marina there. Thankfully, me and the owner of that marina began to have a very good relationship and had everything that I needed there. And we had dive equipment on board that Corey had brought down. So instead of getting hauled out, I decided to do a check via the scuba gear that I had. I went down, checked the bottom, make sure there was no real bad leaks, because at this time I didn't know where the water was coming from. And as soon as I got off the hard, or off the bottom, the the leak had subsided, and so I did a bottoms check and made sure everything down below was fine. I made sure the shaft was fine, the prop was fine. I inquired about a surveyor. I got him on board, and he went through the boat with me and told me that, look, the boat isn't really sea safe right now. You don't need to take it offshore. And this big of a boat, we couldn't necessarily go down the ICW with the sticks up. Me and him were talking and developed a plan of saying, well, we're gonna have to redo the rigging anyways, so let's take down the mast and you can go up the ICW. At that point, I got a crane to come in, and we plugged the masts, and I prepped to go down the ICW with me, Eric, and everybody's help there at the marina. At one point, I had 10 people running around the whole marina helping me pull the sticks off, prepping everything. It was an amazing job. I want to thank everybody there at Fish Island, because I couldn't have done it without you guys. And I prepped the boat, got the sticks down on the deck, got everything secured down, and that's when I left St. Augustine to go up to ICW.
And you recovered the anchors.
Oh yes, I can't. Again, the marina let me use his workboat to go pull up the anchors. We used a grapple that his father had. I had a wonderful experience there at Fish Island, and I packed my bags and I rolled out. And I was at this point so happy to just keep going and finally get underway and get all this stuff behind me.
And that was pretty much like, that was it. I mean, it's still a long ways away, but from that point on,
yeah,
you just motored up here.
Yeah, as soon as I left the dock in St. Augustine, we were just non-stop running 10, 12 hours a day.
So that's it, guys. That wraps up the story of how Captain Carlos and the big white boat made the end of their journey from Miami through St. Augustine and up to Norfolk, Virginia. We'll see you next time, and until then, stay away.